Hello, I am Sophie Rickard. Today I will be interviewing Olivia Yates for the Community College of Baltimore County LGBTQ+ Oral History Project. If you could state your names, your pronouns, and the date and the location for me.
Cool. My name is Olivia Yates. I use she, her pronouns. It is the 18th of June, 2024, and we are in the Arts and Humanities building in the basement in the studio.
Great. Can you tell me about your personal journey, just kind of growing up here in Baltimore, discovering your bisexuality, and also kind of just go into your time at the community school and how you got John Waters to speak at your school?
Sure. So yeah, I've grown up in Baltimore my whole life. I've lived in the same house my whole life, born and raised in Hamden. And I went to the community school in Remington, and that was, for a number of reasons, a really unique experience. One is just its history altogether. So Thomas Collada, he founded the school, and he started it because some of the residents asked him if he would start a high school, because the local school, which was called Robert Poole, I think it had like a 60% dropout rate. It was very high. And actually a school superintendent told Mr. Tom, that's what the students call him, to his face that the students in that neighborhood couldn't be educated. So, I mean, obviously very offensive for so many reasons. And that was, it was more than that. It was that the education system at Robert Poole just wasn't good. And so he literally started a high school. And at first I think it was just sort of like a community program. Then it became a GED program, and then it became a certified high school. And I always really looked up to Mr. Tom just because of his activist past. He was really involved in the American Indian movement. There's a bunch of different things that he did locally in Remington, which is where the community school is located. And when I was a student there, I think the most students that we ever had was 20. That would sometimes fluctuate between 15 or 14, but the most students that we ever had was 20. And so it was a very welcoming school. I mean, of course, Mr. Tom was very left in all of his politics. So there was never any fear, thankfully, in saying, I'm a lesbian or I'm gay or I'm non-binary. There was really never any fear like that. I hadn't, up until that point, I think, I don't think I really started saying I'm bisexual until I was maybe in my senior year. And then even then, I don't think I was very open about it. Not because I was afraid or I felt I'd be kind of looked down upon by my classmates. I don't even know if I really had a reason. I think it was just something that I kind of kept to myself. I had a lot of friends who were bisexual or who were lesbians. So it was really normal to me. And I think although I think everybody kind of has their own journey, I like to think that I remember the specific day where I finally put a label on myself where I was okay, yeah, I'm probably bisexual, is I was walking in Hamden with my friend, a really close friend of mine, and we were just walking back to my house, and I remember I saw this really pretty girl, and I was laughing with my friend, and I was hey, we should go talk to her. And then me and my friend went up, and I was trying to flirt and everything. It was I love looking back on it. It was such a cute moment. And then after we had walked away from where we had left the store, where we had been talking to her, my friend just started getting really excited, and she was so this means you like girls then, right? And then I was yeah, I guess I do. So that was kind of how I think I first realized, okay, yeah, I'm probably bisexual. And so, yeah, as much as I loved my experience at the community school, I felt we didn't always have specific talks about being gay, or like, of course, like it was very, like I can't stress enough how welcoming of an environment it was. It just, sometimes we talk about like other political matters, and I just felt like sometimes LGBTQ plus rights like wasn't always like at the forefront. So when I came to CCBC, I immediately was like, well, I'm bisexual and I love talking about LGBTQ plus rights. I need to find something where I can get involved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's super cool. So I know that you have a little bit of history just with John Waters.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk about that?
Oh yeah, right. Okay, so we had this series called the Conversation With series. And so basically what that is we'd bring in just a speaker from everyday life, and they'd like talk about growing up, what their experience was, like what their job is, their career. And so I found out that Atomic Books in Hamden had John Waters' P.O. box, or they like collected his fan mail or something like that. And so I asked Mr. Tom, I was like, hey, can I write to John Waters and see if he'll come in for a conversation with? And he was like, that's cool. And so I wrote him a letter, I sent it, and then I was in, like a couple weeks go by, and I was in history class, and I remember the school gets a phone call, and one of the students like took the call, and they were like, it's for you, Olivia. And I was like, me? Okay, and that's weird. And then so I picked up the phone, and then she was like, hi, this is John Waters' assistant, and I just want to talk to you about Mr. Waters possibly coming in. And I was so excited, and I made the arrangements and everything. Like I pretty much like kind of coordinated that whole effort like by myself. And so he came in on a Friday, and I was so excited to see him. And I remember he talked about he talked about so many different things. I remember he talked about his relationship with Divine, the very famous drag queen, like what he was kind of trying to do with some of his art, like how he got into making movies. And I had watched his film Serial Mom with like two of my friends like before he came in. And so it was just really surreal like to get to ask him like about that film, and then not only that, but like just to hear just how he got into making films, and especially as like a part of the LGBTQ plus community, both him and I mean, he's a pretty iconic figure just around Baltimore generally, but also amongst the LGBTQ community, to be so open and to make such like bold art, and to like hear him talk about that bold art and like why he made it, like his thoughts behind it. I mean, it was just a surreal moment. And then afterwards, I got to like shake his hand and say thank you for coming in. So it was just really awesome. It's probably one of my favorite memories, like remembering meeting like somebody to me who is so iconic and special, and like having gotten to share him like with my classmates was awesome.
Yeah, that sounds so awesome. It just sounds so unreal. Okay, so you did work on the LGBTQ oral history project previously for CCBC. Since you were one of the first, if not the first, candidate to be brought on for this specific oral history project, could you tell me more about that? Kind of like, how did you find out about it? When did you work on it? And who did you interview? And what do you think the project did to help the LGBTQ community at CCBC?
Sure. So this was in the summer of 2022, after I had graduated from CCBC, and I don't remember exactly how I found out about it. Well, I knew Chris Rudolph, and we were both in GSA together, so it's likely that I found out about it from her. And so I signed up. There was, I think, 4 other students, and I worked with Andre, and he was one of the founders of the GSA many years ago on CCBC's, on Essex campus, because I think in his time there was only just this campus, just Essex. And so I was really excited for that because I have just so much respect for elders. And I mean, for a million reasons, I have respect for them. I mean, one is just for experiencing, just for the experience of being LGBTQ plus and being a part of the community, and whether or not they were fully open or whether they kind of kept it to themselves, I still think I have a lot of respect for having lived in a time where being gay and being open wasn't as normalized. So, I mean, that was one of the reasons why I jumped at it. And then also because we've lost so much of our elders to the AIDS crisis. So, and I think there's now, we're seeing a really big resurgence, and we're seeing a big resurgence of LGBTQ plus hate, and it's becoming, I think, normalized in a lot of ways. And one of the talking points that those individuals will always use is that being gay or non-binary, that's a very new thing, and it's not. And so I mean, I just felt it was really special to be capturing that history. I mean, at CCBC of all places, because I love CCBC and I really love the idea of community colleges. And I think just having that history that exists, it's there to say basically a whole antithesis to the narrative that being gay is somehow new or somehow new idea. And so, I mean, it was just super special to capture his, just his life, a slice of his life, and what it was like being a gay man after he left CCBC and how he got the GSA started here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So while you were doing this interview, were there any really significant moments that really stuck with you, or was there anything that you learned while working on this LGBTQ oral history project that really struck a chord with you?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a bunch of things. I think with Andre specifically, I think hearing how little students were involved in the GSA, at least just at the time, but how they were still going strong. I think after, if I'm remembering correctly, after he had left CCBC, I don't know if the GSA necessarily continued, but I think that even the fact that they were there, because I believe he was on campus in the 70s. So to be LGBTQ plus now in the 70s, I mean, that's pretty significant. So I mean, just his bravery stuck out to me. And then also, I think when he, if I'm remembering correctly again, when he had initially applied to get the GSA started, the other organization that was applying was the KKK, I think. And so I think that kind of just was so, I mean, just surreal, because it's I mean, obviously I was not there in the 70s, but I mean, to hear that lived history and how normalized I think some of that hate was, I mean, it was just insane. So that stuck out to me. And it also it kind of made me feel although we are, this isn't to say systemic racism or LGBTQ plus hate hasn't gone away, but just to hear him say that and talk about how normalized some of that hate was at the time, kind of made me very thankful for the for the experience I've had, because I've always felt very welcomed at CCBC's campus as a bisexual person, and in the spaces I've gone into. I felt very safe and comfortable wearing that openly. And that's another reason why I have so much respect for elders like Andre, and why I had so much respect to be, or I was so thankful rather to be a part of the project, because it's as an LGBTQ plus individual, I feel I'm constantly standing on their shoulders of their lived experience and the activists who made it so that it's so open and accepted today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So could you explain what a GSA is, just for those that don't know what that is?
Sure. So I think we changed our name. I think at first it was the Gay Straight Alliance, and then we changed it to the Gender and Sexuality Acceptance Club. But basically, just for CCBC specifically, yeah, I think we had monthly meetings, and like we kind of just like talk about, like sometimes we talk about just like how we were doing. I mean, normally that's how like a meeting would go. Like we talk about how we were doing, but we'd also talk about like brainstorm possible like events that we could put on, just anything that like we could do to not only engage other LGBTQ plus students on campus, but also just the students in general. And so when I first found out about the GSA, I did it was all virtual because I was a 2020 high school graduate. So I graduated at like the very beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so I don't even think I met some of the members of CCBC's GSA for like a year later. Like we'd only been meeting on Zoom. And so, which was a very interesting experience. It's just very interesting, like generally to like know people very well and then like not really know like what they look like in person for like a year and then some months. So, I don't know. Yeah, it was just, it's one of my like very fond memories of like that I have of being at CCBC, because I felt like we created a strong community. And even though like we were few, we were really strong.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. So now that we're kind of talking about your experience at CCBC,
Mm-hmm.
would you mind kind of telling us, like, so you attended in 2020. What was your major and which campus did you mainly attend?
Sure, so I mainly attended the Essex campus. My major was just general studies, although I took a lot of political science classes, so technically like my major was almost designed like for a political science major, but the title is just general studies.
I gotcha. Okay, and so what attracted you to CCBC? Did growing up in Baltimore influence your decision to attend, or were there other attributes?
Well, both of my parents went to CCBC. They didn't continue college after that, but they both have associate's degrees from CCBC. And so that was what kind of pushed me to apply here. Also, to be honest, the student debt crisis, I was very afraid of going into debt, and CCBC was a very affordable option for me. Because I really kind of dragged my feet around the admissions process. I just don't really think I wouldn't say that I didn't care. I just wasn't necessarily worried about where I was going to go to school. Maybe I just felt like wherever I ended up, like I'd just try my best and things would turn out fine. So I only applied to 2 colleges, CCBC and Notre Dame. And I decided not to go to Notre Dame because even with a scholarship, I probably would have graduated with like $100,000 plus in debt. And a lot of people I know went to CCBC. So I think that's kind of like what pushed me to choose here.
Yeah, okay, awesome. So how did your experiences as a student here at CCBC influence your perspectives on LGBTQ issues and the LGBTQ community as a whole here at CCBC?
Yeah, I think, I think like when I went to University of Baltimore, even though both CCBC and University of Baltimore could be called a commuter college, I felt like University of Baltimore was on another level because a lot of the students were like not necessarily coming to class in person. Like a lot of the classes were online, even though we're out of COVID. And so it's really hard to meet people. And I don't know if there is a GSA there or not. But that's something that I really look back fondly on and something that I missed actually when I got to University of Baltimore, is that I missed being a part of the GSA just because, for a lot of reasons. One, being an LGBTQ student, I like to see my own kind. And so, and like having like a club just dedicated just to us is nice. So I kind of like mourn that a little bit. And I think like just the LGBTQ history project and like working on that here like gave me a really big appreciation for our elders. So like that, and I don't think like without that, like because the GSA had just on our own, like without, but like before the LGBTQ history project, we had our own connections with elders. And so I think without CCBC and without the GSA, I don't know if I would have had the same appreciation or like the same knowledge of LGBTQ history and also our elders. I mean, and that's something that I've kind of been a little bit disillusioned with, is the lack of LGBTQ history. Like even in high school, of course, a lot of the textbooks that are used are like mandated or prescribed by the state. So it's not like we necessarily have a choice, but in those, like LGBTQ history is just kind of like, if it's there, it's very little. It's like a paragraph and like that's it. And so, and even like at college, obviously you can take classes in LGBTQ history, but if I hadn't done the GSA, then I wouldn't have gotten any of it, because like I said, I was doing political science and general studies, so there weren't a lot of like chances to take humanities classes where like I could learn specifically about LGBTQ rights and history. So without the GSA, like it probably wouldn't have existed in my life, like LGBTQ connections. I mean, the only other space where I really feel like I have that is the internet. And then other than that, there was like nothing. So I don't know, that's one of the reasons why I'm really appreciative of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally understand that. So since we're talking about the GSA right now, you joined during your first semester at CCBC?
Yes.
And how did you come to discover that community? Was it through an email, word of mouth, professor, through the school website? How'd you find out about it?
I think it might have been through a professor, and I think it was through my ACDV professor. And she, like, I think she might have sent something out, like a flyer, and then I joined and I attended a meeting, I think. And so it was pretty much one of those things where it was like, from the first meeting, I knew I wanted to be involved. So it was like after that first meeting, I started attending regularly, and then that kind of grew from attending regularly to actually being more involved in like helping curate some of our like programs and stuff like that.
Yeah. So you were pretty involved in a lot of projects while you were here at CCBC. Could you tell me more about those projects and about your work on those projects?
Yeah, so so there was two that like I really like point out. One was the Culture from Your Couch in GSA, and then the Good School podcast that I did. I guess I'll start with Culture from Your Couch first. So Culture from Your Couch was where we had a program that was on Zoom, and we'd cover something specific concerning LGBTQ history, or just like LGBTQ culture. So for instance, we did one on photography, and that was a mix of culture and history. And we started all the way from the 1800s to modern times, and we just covered LGBTQ photographers. And one of my favorites was Alice Austin, and I remember her so well because my mentor, Mr. Tom, he joined that program, and he like had no idea that she existed, like despite him like teaching history. So, and I really also appreciated her because she did, like I think some of my favorite photographs where she just take pictures of everyday life, but also she documented lesbians in the 1800s. So yeah, I loved her. And we did one on comics. I remember we did one with elders, like, and we talked about like food and like what they like to cook. So I mean, it was so diverse, like in the topics that we chose. So yeah, that was Culture from Your Couch. And the other main project that I was involved in was the Good School podcast. And I was on it from its inception. So I technically, along with the other students, helped create the idea. And we created it while we were brainstorming what we wanted our topic to be, somebody had put down higher education, and then everybody had something to say on higher education, like whether it was just about our own experience, what we feel like is missing in higher education. And so because everybody had so much to say, we were kind of like, okay, I think this is our topic that we're going to cover. And one of the reasons why that was so important that we were doing that is because it was community college students talking about higher education, and that's not often a voice in that sphere that you hear a lot. So, I mean, we did more than just talk about community college, but like we investigated it as a whole. For instance, the main episode that I researched was called The Faculty. So I researched like faculty at higher education institutions, and I found that a lot of them are using adjuncts, and that led me to investigating how adjuncts are very much mistreated by the institutions that they work at, like whether that be underpaid, given a high class load. And so, yeah, I mean, that was a really interesting experience just because I'm a very proud community college graduate, firstly. But secondly, I mean, it was really, really eye-opening because I felt like I was seeing a world into my professors' lives, which, I mean, obviously as a student, I know my life very well and the grind of being a student, but I didn't know just how badly like some of the professors were struggling. So it was really eye-opening.
Yeah, that sounds like it. So when you worked on Culture from Your Couch, you covered a lot of important LGBTQ historical moments and figures and artists. And I know that you said Alice Austen, is that her name?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
That you said that she had some of your favorite photographs that you covered during that time. Was there a specific historical moment, or was there a specific artist or figure that was your favorite that you covered?
Let's see. I'm just thinking through them all. I mean, Alice Austen is definitely probably one of my favorites. I'd probably say her. I mean, just because like I loved like seeing, because I like the idea of taking photographs of people just doing general things anyway throughout their life. So getting to see people in the 1800s just living life was awesome. But also to know that she was a lesbian and taking photos of lesbians. I mean, at a time when it was like very stigmatized to like be open. Yeah, I mean, I thought it was beautiful. So yeah, I'd probably say her. And then also when we covered the Stonewall riots, those were really important to me. And we watched a documentary called Screaming Queens. And one of the things that always stuck out to me was that the woman who like made the documentary, or like at least talked about a lot of the history, was a transgender woman. And she was talking about, I remember a point in the documentary, she was covering how she had looked back through the archives concerning, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, like newspaper clips from the time that the Stonewall riots occurred. And she was talking about how all of that history might have been forgotten had she not been there to discover it. So, I mean, that just always stuck with me. I think about that from time to time, that history could have been lost had she not chosen to cover it.
Okay, so you brought up Alice Austen and how she had some of your favorite photographs that you looked at during that time. Did you have a specific historical moment or a specific figure during your time on Culture with Your Couch, or Culture from Your Couch, that you want to talk about?
So the other one was the Compton's cafeteria riot. I actually had the chance to talk about that one, not just in the GSA, but also in my communications class. And I just thought that history was so special because it was sort of history that could have been lost to time had the people who worked on the documentary not gone forward with it. And I remember specifically that there was a transgender woman who made the documentary, and in it, it was called Screaming Queens, and in it she talked about the Compton's cafeteria riots, and so I remember her saying that, or going through rather archives of newspapers at the time that like had kind of recorded the riot that had occurred, and she had been explaining that like had she not done that, like it really would not have been, well, the documentary wouldn't have been made, or it wouldn't have been reported on. And so fast forward a little bit, after I watched the Screaming Queens documentary in the GSA, I decided to talk about it in my communications class because it's history that like really nobody knows about. I mean, I didn't know about it. And that history kind of like just gets overshadowed. Like I brought up the history books earlier and how they don't really talk about LGBTQ plus history. Well, I mean, the history that is mentioned is Stonewall, and then everything before that kind of gets overshadowed. So I, in my communications class, decided to talk about the Compton's cafeteria riots. And just like as another way to be like, I'm gonna bring this up in any manner that I can to let people know that LGBTQ plus resistance like didn't start with the Compton's cafeteria riot. But I mean, yeah, that really stood out to me for that reason. And then also just like the bravery of the transgender woman to like record that history and document that history.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. That is history that needs to be talked about more, I think. Okay, so what was it like, because you were a part of all of this during the pandemic, what was it like to be a part of the GSA and to host the Culture from Your Couch and the Good School podcast projects during this time that was so virtual? Because it can be tricky to host a podcast virtually. What was that like?
I mean, well, we had to do everything through email or over text. And I'm more of a person who likes to do things in person and like to see people's faces and to like talk to them face to face. So as much as I loved like working on the projects, I did mourn like some of that, like not getting to like do all of that in person. But sometimes I did think, at least for the GSA, it was good. Because I don't know, college students can be weird. Sometimes they don't want to show up in person to things. Sometimes they like to show up to the Zoom calls, or they would prefer to show up to Zoom calls because they feel like it's more impersonal, I guess is what they're thinking. But it got more people to come out. And for us, like we really tried hard to make it a safe space. Like if you want to show up and keep your camera off, like that's totally fine. So we were totally cool with that. And I liked that too because I felt like it was giving people who would have been afraid to like show up in person, like it gave them like I think the courage to still show up. Because the last thing we would have wanted to do is like isolate anything. So if I were to like start a GSA at University of Baltimore or anywhere else, I'd probably, or specifically on a college campus at least, I'd probably be highly likely to make that virtual too, just because of like, I feel like it did help with that level of comfortability.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah. So you have talked about your time at the University of Baltimore. So you are pursuing labor and employment law. Did your time at CCBC kind of inspire you to pursue this at all? Or like were there any specific professors that you had or any talk in the clubs that you were in that kind of gave you a taste for labor and employment law?
Yeah, I think I'm really not sure. I knew that I wanted to go to law school when I was at CCBC. What I wanted to do, I was always kind of unsure of. At first it was human rights law, because I knew for a fact I didn't want to do something like corporate law or criminal law and be a defense attorney. So I just kind of chose human rights law. I mean, I have an interest in human rights, and I think like labor and employment law intersects a lot with human rights. And I think being on the Good School podcast and learning just how mistreated faculty were, and the adjuncts, like how they were treated specifically and how little they were being paid, how little protections they had, I think that kind of pushed me to choosing labor and employment, or at least it was one of the things that inspired me. And I think just my own experiences with work too, like I'm just a person who thinks that we give too much of our lives to work, and work that we often don't care about. And then on top of that, being mistreated by our employers. So I think seeing people in my life experience that and really inspired me. And then through all of my activist work that I've done, because I'm also involved in some other spheres, like with United Workers, they're a Baltimore-based group, and Coal Kills Baltimore, which is my climate group that I co-founded, seeing, because a lot of, well, United Workers, of course, because it's in the name, but hearing some of the members in that group like talk about their experiences with work, and just how much they were struggling with their little pay. I think it was just a culmination of all those things that kind of made me be like, yeah, I'm gonna choose to focus on labor and employment.
Mm-hmm. And how might your focus on labor and employment kind of intersect with your focus on LGBTQ like rights and civil rights, kind of involving fair and livable wages, worker safety, discrimination laws, kind of all of that?
Yeah, and labor employment like intersects with so many things, because I mean you're also looking at like sometimes sexual harassment claims, discrimination claims. So there's a whole bunch of different issues that it intersects with. I'd like to hope that like if there were that I knew, at least with LGBTQ rights specifically, that I as a lawyer could defend an LGBTQ individual who's being discriminated against by their employers, whether that looks like not receiving pay, or being denied promotions, or not being hired, like just generally because they are LGBTQ plus. Like I could totally see that being a case that I'd work on, and something that I'd defend.
Yeah, absolutely. So we talked previously a little bit about how when you attended the University of Baltimore, there wasn't really a GSA there, but you are planning on attending University of Baltimore Law School next fall, right? Or this fall, I guess. If there is like a GSA club or any other projects or podcasts, kind of like the ones that you worked on here, would you have any plans to join or work on any stuff like that?
It depends on how busy law school gets me, because all the lawyers that I've spoke to have been like, yeah, I had no life in law school. So I'd like to hope that if I actually have a life, I will be involved in something. And I'm not sure, I think the Baltimore School of Law has some sort of like, I don't know if it's that they have a GSA specifically, but they more than likely have some sort of like LGBTQ Lawyers Guild, like something like that. And like, because the University of Baltimore right now, their undergrad school, like if I'm remembering correctly, like I think they have like a GSA, but it's not really active. Like a lot of our like other clubs like aren't really active, and that's something that like I'm kind of coming up against now is the lack of activity, because I'm trying to get some Palestinian solidarity stuff started on our campus, and we haven't done a whole lot yet because we only started this month. But one of the things that came up in our first meetings was that like, I mean, how are we going to engage students when some of the clubs aren't like super active? But I mean, I'm hoping that if I get to the University of Baltimore School of Law and there are LGBTQ students, that I would be doing something with them. Because I mean, that sense of community is just like it's really relaxing. Like I always felt really relaxed here at CCBC because like I knew people, and I probably wouldn't have known people on campus had it not been for the GSA because it was COVID and nobody was in person.
Yeah, absolutely. That is so cool. That's such a cool project to be working on because it's so important right now.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you if you could give any current or future LGBTQ students at CCBC kind of a word of advice or maybe some words of wisdom that could help them to seek their own path or to give them encouragement to keep moving forward.
Yeah, I think I'd probably say like to be unapologetically yourself and to, and if you're in a safe enough place, of course, like to just live openly, especially like when we're living in times where people are pulling the, LGBTQ plus people have never existed through history. I think, and this isn't to excuse like that sort of ignorance, but I think when people see other LGBTQ people in their life, like it really does normalize it in that sense. Like in high school, like I knew a lot of other LGBTQ individuals, but in my personal life, like at home, like I never knew any LGBTQ individuals. And I think like if you're somebody who has no interactions between them, like both at home and at school, like I feel like you're more susceptible to like lean in towards those like lies that are often like portrayed in the media. So I definitely say that, like to be unapologetically yourself, and to, I think, just know that you're being a part of history just by existing. I'm sure Andre, I don't know if he thought that he'd be a part of history like when he was getting a GSA started here. But I mean, now he definitely is because like we did the LGBTQ oral history project. So I'd say like, just know that like you're important like just by existing. And if you have like people in your life who because we oftentimes like can't choose who's in our life based on our family, like who is saying, who is like kind of, perpetuating those anti-LGBTQ plus narratives, like just know that there are people out there who love you and who will accept you unconditionally. Like the GSA was always very accepting. Like whenever somebody like came into the room, the Zoom room, like no matter who they were, like I'd like to hope that, like we were creating sort of like a family narrative. That they were loved regardless. Like I may not know you, but like I love your existence. So yeah, I'd probably end it there.
Yeah. I think that more people need to be as unapologetic as John Waters is.
Yeah.
And just kind of going off of your advice, can you reflect on any personal challenges or successes that you encountered as a bisexual student at CCBC that might have shaped the advice that you just gave?
Yeah, I don't know like if there were, because it's definitely, I mean, at least reflecting on modern times where it's more normalized like to be open, there was never anything that happened to me where I felt like I was dealing with discrimination. Whenever I said I was bisexual, like I felt pretty like accepted. So at least not from that point of view. Like I didn't feel like I ever felt or experienced any systemic like discrimination in that way. But I think like just in my personal life, like being a bisexual woman who is in a straight relationship, sometimes like I kind of feel like isolated in a lot of ways, like just as though, I don't know, like, and sometimes this is just my own personal reflections, is that like maybe sometimes I'm making it up in my head, but sometimes I feel like, well, is it okay to claim that I'm bisexual, like if I'm in a straight relationship, and stuff like that. And I think like one of the things that led me just to be like, I'm gonna live unapologetically as myself, is kind of that experience, is that just being like, well, I am bisexual, and I feel like that's a big part of my of myself and my being, I'm not going to let that like kind of keep me from saying I am bisexual, even if like being bisexual in a relationship like in a straight relationship that is like has sort of like some stigmas or like anything like that. I do think sometimes there is a little bit of a privilege though, at least to be like passing in that way, because there has been times where like I'm like, well, thank God my partner, like where I've been in personal spaces in my own personal life where I've been like, yeah, I don't think if my fiance was a woman I would be as accepted and loved, and it is easier to like pass and like not have to say that I'm bisexual or have people like questioning my sexuality because they see that I'm already in a straight relationship. So sometimes that works out when like I'm in a space where I feel like I'm uncomfortable, and if these people knew I was bisexual, they would make me feel uncomfortable. And then other times I feel isolated because I'm like, well, now I just look like I'm straight, and people just assume that I'm straight. So it's like that really hard flip-flop like between those two emotions. And I think that, like I said, just to reiterate, that's like one of the experiences that I've had that's kind of pushed me to be like, well, I'm just going to say I'm bisexual, and people are just going to have to live with that.
Mm-hmm, absolutely, loud and proud.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just want to thank you for taking the time to sit down and be interviewed. This was an awesome experience, and thank you again.
Thank you. Yeah, I loved this.
Me too.